A couple months ago, I made a video in which I outlined the development of a game I made during one of my college courses. In this college course, every student had to create their own 2D game, and because I was coming from an art background, I chose a genre that I thought would be a majority art and as minimal coding as possible, but it turned out that I only worked on the art for the first couple weeks and spent the rest of the 3 months on the code because that's just how little I knew about the code and how much more time that took me. I'm basically just an artist that wants to specialize into video games. I always knew I was going to do something with art, but it wasn't until much later that I decided I wanted to use it to make video games. So because I always need a project to work on, I've decided to take this game that I was really proud of during the semester and improve upon it because it already has a good foundation rather than starting something new. So at first, at the beginning of the summer, I made ideas on how to make the game bigger and better. The game is a 2D point-and-click puzzle game in which you're a student at a magical academy and you have to learn how to make your final assignment, which is to craft a potion. You have to figure out which ingredient is used, and you have to go around and obtain that ingredient. Originally, I wanted there to be 3 different ingredients and you had to put the correct combination of ingredients, but because I only had 4 months to work on this, I decided to only do 1. But I thought maybe for the summer, I could expand it and make it so that it was the 3 ingredients. I was gonna add 1 more location and an NPC and just fix up and add a bunch more puzzles. But I realized I had been stuck on the code for a little while and my art wasn't what I wanted it to be. I took a step back and realized that as an artist, I want my art to shine the most in my portfolio to be able to get the jobs and opportunities that I want. And making the game bigger wouldn't necessarily add to that goal. So I decided to update all of the existing art before adding new gameplay. The first thing I needed to do was create a concise color palette because before I was just kind of picking colors that went well together. They were already pretty similar, but I just needed something that I could work with for the rest of the project. Sprite has a really simple system for creating your own color palette and saving it so that whenever I open a new canvas, I can just import the same color palette. I also will want to make the background pretty different, like the far background of the garden. I want a closer and more closed off garden with trees closer to the foreground rather than the current far away hills situation that I have right now. Also, when I was deciding on adding a new location, it was going to be to the left of the garden and I was going to change the pond into a river so that there would have to be a puzzle for the player to cross the river instead of just being able to walk around the pond. So there's a lot of things I'm going to have to change about this garden. So when I made the art for this game, I just kind of winged it and just did what came naturally to me. But if I'm gonna bring my art up to a professional level, I'm gonna have to reference some professional pixel art. And today I'm choosing WITCHBROOK. I want to learn how to draw grass like WITCHBROOK. I'm so excited for this game to come out later this year, and as I was working on this art, WITCHBROOK posted a blog post, and they do not do that very often. But it got me pretty revved up and made me realize that this is really what I want to do. I want to be able to contribute to a project that I'm this excited about, and to do that, I'm going to need to be able to make art that they need. So, drawing like this is a much longer process because I'm not just drawing what comes naturally to me, I'm forcing myself to create in a brand new way, which is good for me as an artist and just as someone trying to build a skill, but it's way harder and more taxing on my brain, and I just went so much slower than I am used to going. And it's obviously not going to be as good as the professional game right away, but I'm just trying to flex my skills and bring it up to my current skill level. The art in this game was never my max ability, I would say, because during the semester, I was just trying to pump it out as quickly as I could so I could finish something in 4 months, and now I can really sit back and take my time and do everything that needs to be done. I'm also trying to learn to work in a more complex workflow that works for me rather than defaulting to my usual easy style. I'm just trying to train myself to do things better and not default to what's easiest. So now this part's going to be a little bit of a tutorial. First and foremost, there's a lot of artistic principles that I always keep in mind. Coming from an artistic background, someone who's been in art classes all throughout high school, all throughout college, these are things that I'm already doing, that I'm already paying attention to. First of all, in the color palette that I talked about earlier, the main thing you're going to want to pay attention to is hue shifting. This just refers to when you have one color and you want to make a lighter version or a darker version, don't just move the value up and down. As you're moving the value up and down, also shift the hue. So say you're working with a green, the shadows are going to be a little bit more blue and the highlights are going to be a little bit more yellow, for example. This just gives it so much more depth and you can see how much more vibrant and interesting the colors are rather than only moving the value. Also, the concept of negative space or areas of rest. These are two kind of different things, but I kind of use them in tandem. Areas of rest is going to be really important in this video because that just means when you're adding detail and objects and just visual elements, you need areas on your canvas for your eye to rest. If there's the same amount of detail on every square inch of that canvas, the viewer is not going to know what to look at. Your eye's going to be jumping around the canvas. You're not going to be able to look at one thing. The point of focus is not going to be as important. So areas of rest, just pockets of area where there's no detail going on or very little detail going on, and you can see that in these WITCHBROOK references. There's areas of this grass, which is what I'm particularly looking at, where there's nothing going on, and then other parts where it's very densely detailed, and that's kind of the balance that I'm going to try to achieve. And last but not least, line of action or composition. In this piece, line of action is going to be much more important. In WITCHBROOK, you can see this brown dirt trail is a very obvious line of action that moves your eye through the screen. In game design, it's even more important because it doesn't just tell the user where to look, it tells the player where to walk. So it's this visual language in game design where you want to tell your player what to do without a sign. It's just the visual language of here's kind of a path I can walk on. So to do that in this grass, it's pretty simple for me because it's literally a point and click game where it's only left and right. It's not that difficult, but I'm trying to keep these patches of light grass to the edges and then keep more of the areas of rest in the middle. So it kind of naturally funnels the player into the middle. I don't know. It's not as important when you're only going left and right, but it's just something I'm keeping in mind. I also understand that WITCHBROOK is way more detailed than my game. It has a much higher pixel art aspect ratio, and my game art is going to be less detailed on purpose. The WITCHBROOK grass, at least in this reference photo, has 4 different colors and way more detail. Mine is only going to have 3 colors with slightly less detail. So this is not a one-for-one tutorial on how to paint grass like WITCHBROOK. It's more of a tutorial on how to look at something professional and translate it into your own work without copying. I'm not trying to copy paste WITCHBROOK's anything into my game. I highly respect it and admire it, but I'm purely using it as a learning tool for myself to give myself a blueprint of what I should be doing. WITCHBROOK also hue shifts their grass. You can tell their lighter grass is a little bit of a yellow green and their darker grass is a little bit of a blue green. I'm making new colors for the grass to be closer together so it doesn't compete for attention with the stuff on top. So the grass detail is not going to be off my original color palette. It's going to be slightly different colors that are going to blend into the background. It's kind of interesting. The thing I'm paying the most attention to and adding detail to, I actually want it to be invisible. I actually don't want my player to focus on this at all. So choosing colors that are closer together is going to make sure there's not much contrast going on and it's not going to compete for attention with the stuff that actually matters. I'm starting with large areas of color and adding details inside. This just makes sense to me. I'm kind of starting with the large lines of action and areas, and then I'm layering the 3 colors as the darkest on the bottom in the shadow and the lightest ones on top in the sun. I'm paying attention to the shapes that WITCHBROOK uses. I see these little patches of grass where they use the darker lines inside of the lighter shapes to indicate the way the little blades of grass are sitting. These circular areas kind of look like a patch of grass where people have stepped and kind of flattens it down. And then there's these little humped bits, which look like little pieces of foliage sticking up. So there's a lot of different shapes that WITCHBROOK is using within its grass. It's not just one shape repeated over and over again. There's also these areas of actual tall grass, which is more of an asset placed on top, which I'm kind of ignoring for right now, but I might add something similar to that later. There are some spaces where there's too much detail happening because I'm so zoomed in and I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing right now. But later, I'm removing parts from the detailed areas and moving it further away. Also, much later, as I'm working towards the left of my screen, I'm copy pasting areas from the right, adding it to the left, and then building on top of that to make it different. In pixel art, you often have a tile sheet where you're literally copy pasting things over and over again and trying to maintain an illusion of randomness, especially if you're doing something like the grass. Because my area is so small, and also because I'm using this as kind of a training exercise, I'm not using any type of tile sheet, but copy pasting is kind of a midway point. So I'm reusing small areas of art and then building on top of it to make it look different. Especially because this is such a small area, I don't want my player to notice any large chunks of repeated detail, even though that wouldn't really be a bad thing. In pixel art, a lot of times the background or the floor tiles are always repeated, but I'm gonna use that more on the inside areas where there's tiles and walls and floors, but for right now, I'm using it very minimally. As I'm learning the shapes that WITCHBROOK uses, I'm kind of creating my own. So I'm not trying to copy one for one how WITCHBROOK does it, but as I'm getting the muscle memory and learning the philosophy behind their shape language, I'm kind of doing it a little bit in my own way. I'm using these like swooping pointed shapes a lot more, which are not in WITCHBROOK, but for me, when I'm drawing grass, that's just kind of more natural. That's just kind of how I intuitively draw it. So my grass is just gonna look like how I draw grass. And now we can look at this patch of grass in game, how different it looks. It looks very out of place right now because again, the grass is really supposed to fade into the background, but because it's the only thing that is detailed, it's actually taking up the most attention and nothing around it is detailed yet. But I really like how this section of the grass turned out. The grass is gonna kind of be my blueprint and everything else around it has to kind of step up to the plate to match it. So it looks very strange right now, but I'm excited to see the progress. And I'm going to be doing this for everything, making changes to fit my game and taking inspiration from different sources to bring my art up to my standards. And I hope to make another video soon of the entire garden being just as detailed and just as interesting as this little patch of grass. So I hope you enjoyed and maybe got something out of it. And if you want to play my game, Potions 101, the itch.io page is going to be linked in the description. I'll see you soon.